my office has been trying to incorporate council concerns, council suggestions, having public work sessions.
Hi there, it's WAMC News Director Ian Pickus. And on this episode of the WAMC News Podcast, an extended conversation with the mayor of Plattsburgh about his latest budget proposal. Well, Plattsburgh Mayor Chris Rosenquest, a Democrat, says the 2024 budget plan is balanced and stays under the state-mandated tax cap. The $62 million budget includes a $26 million general fund. Rosenquest says he worked extensively with city departments to craft the fiscal plan. He spoke with our North Country Bureau Chief, Pat Bradley.
Last year, we had to make a major adjustment. I was given a budget with a $2 million deficit that we had to make up during the mayor's proposed budget process. This year was just under $1 million, adjusted considerably from the last year's budget that I received. It wasn't that bad. $1 million to make up is manageable in a full-on $26 million, $27 million general fund budget. The other budgets pretty much balance themselves over time. So when it comes to managing that gap, a lot of it is staffing. Departments may be asking for additional heads and additional members of their department, but that needs to be adjusted. Some of it is adjusting revenues. Some of it is adjusting other expenses and refining some of the contracts, that we might typically employ over the year.
I know that I think it was even just last year you were relieved that some of the union contracts and some of the retroactive payments to them had been resolved. Were they problematic at all this year, or was it other departments that ended up being more problematic for the proposed 2024 budget?
Well, I wouldn't say any one department was problematic. What I would say is that it was nice to have those contracts settled, which is why when we look at the overall difference in expenses, it's under 2%. It's almost 1%. And a lot of that is because those contracts were settled and a lot of that retroactive payment was applied for last year's budget. So when we come into this year's budget, it was not a major concern in terms of having to catch up on contracts and make large payments to increases in retroactive payment. So when we come into this year, all of that's been settled out, and it was just really a matter of fine-tooth comb over some of these more nuanced budget items, again, contracts, services that we provide, as well as some staffing requests that have come in through some of the departments.
Well, it looks like at least with expenses and revenue, the MLD, the Municipal Lighting Department, is by far the most expensive, and probably combined the other departments don't even match it. Why do they cost so much?
Well, it is also its own enterprise. It does deliver electricity to the city, as well as all of the services that require to deliver electricity to the city, the maintenance and the equipment, the staffing as well. So that is a larger scale enterprise that we operate in the city of Plattsburgh. When you look at those types of services, electricity, water, sewer, they are going to be more expensive to deliver that service, as well as it also quasi-operates independently from the city of Plattsburgh. Overall government structure. It has its own board, although that board is made up of the council, and the oversight is over the regulatory body that oversees the operation of our municipal lighting department. The Public Service Commission also has some say in how that department operates. So, as much as it is a city department or city level department or a department that delivers services within the city, it really is also managed quasi-independent from city operations through that regulatory body and through its own board, if you will.
Mayor, in the release that you sent, you stated that the process provided valuable insight into the desires of our management team. So I was curious what some of the goals of their budgets aim to achieve and how much would have to be a long-term approach to meet those aims.
Yeah, and every department has its own desires and needs. Every department has its own goals and objectives. I think the ones that stand out the most, police, for example, stabilizing operations, getting some traction on increasing traffic control, speeding, and other types of traffic issues that we start to see upticks in. Those are considerations and concerns that are built into this budget. Department of Public Works, we've heard it multiple times, take care of the parks, take care of the green space. That is also a consideration in this budget. This budget adds another downtown cleanup person. We've already have one full-time cleanup person downtown that manages all of downtown, picking garbage, picking trash off the streets, weeding, and taking care of the green space downtown in the special assessment district. We're adding another person, proposed adding another person to that team, so you have two full-time people managing the green space in downtown. We're adding another full-time person as well as additional temporaries to park maintenance. Again, our parks are in gross disrepair. This is something that we've identified over the last couple of years, as well as put forth a plan through the Parks Renewal Project. But in addition to that plan for revamping our parks, we're also looking at adding additional people to supporting the maintenance and ongoing cleanup of those parks.
Well, along those lines, you also stated that in 2024, the primary focus would be parks, green space maintenance, public safety, and economic growth. So where are you focusing economic growth? What are you looking at there?
Yeah, 100%. So as we start to see the comprehensive master plan come to fruition, which was just approved by the council, we're undergoing a year-long process to revamp our zoning code and our land use planning laws. Part of that revamp will and should contribute to an immediate economic factor of growth within the city of Plattsburgh. Just the notion of allowing builders and developers to come into the city to develop as a right. For example, multi-unit buildings and housing, which is desperately needed in the city of Plattsburgh. We just had a meeting last week with a potential housing developer who wants to do a large-scale housing development, hundreds of units within the city of Plattsburgh, and identifying properties. But even with that interest, we still have antiquated zoning and land use laws that do not allow for that kind of development without jumping through a significant amount of hoops to get there. The whole point of the economic growth focused on the revision of zoning and planning is to ensure and facilitate that kind of development can and should happen within the city of Plattsburgh.
So if you can get those zoning laws, zoning codes changed, what kind of projects do you think would actually be completed in 2024?
I don't know about completed in 2024, but my office's goal right now is that once those are approved, once those zoning code changes are approved by the council, we have developers that are lined up ready to go the day that those zoning codes are approved, with their applications to be submitted for permitting for any zoning code. For any zoning code permissions that aren't already allowed in the code or the revised code, that those folks are ready to go from day one. That's a big focus of my office right now. It's a big focus of community development right now, as well as the senior planner.
Now, I've heard you say that the proposed budget is under the tax cap, but I've also heard you refer to it as sub 2%. So how much is it actually under the state mandated tax cap?
So the state mandated tax cap is a calculation, and I think that's pretty important for people to understand. So when we do it, and it's a 2% tax cap, that's what the state says, but it's also a calculation and includes things like pilot payments and agreements like this and loans and payments towards loans from the general fund. And it's actually a very complex calculation. Honestly, I have to go back every single time and remind myself what is in this calculation. So when we say under the tax cap, but you look at our tax rate, our tax levy increase is at, I think it's like 2.06%. It's still, even though it's above 2%, it still falls within the mandated tax cap, limitation. So
it's not like the old days when you could say it's 0.5% under the tax cap or something like
Correct,
that.
correct. Because it is a calculation now per state law. If it were not above the tax cap, we would have to pass a local resolution to submit this budget that does not fall underneath the tax cap, and that's not something that we're willing to do.
So, down to the basics here, how does the proposed budget affect city taxpayers?
Well, it depends. Like if you had a reassessment last year, you'll see a decrease in your annual tax bill. But again, like one of the major reasons why we were able to deliver a sub $10 mill rate is because we went through a significant amount of commercial reassessments this year, to the point where our assessed values in the city of Plattsburgh rose about 11%, a little bit more than 11%. We have not seen an 11% increase in our assessed value since 2004. And who knows what happened then. But when we look at the need for reassess of commercial properties, some of our commercial properties hadn't been reassessed in 20-something years. And so when we look at adding those updated assessed values, we do see a significant increase in the assessed values, the total assessed values in the city of Plattsburgh, some 11% or 121 million, I believe it was. And so that allows us to reduce our tax rate and then also deliver the same valued services that people come to appreciate. Now, if you, again, going back to depending on when you got reassessed, if you hadn't been reassessed in the last couple of years as a residential, you were probably under a $10.86 tax rate. Now you'll see a little bit less than that, an 89% reduction in the current tax rate. You should see a little bit of savings on your tax bill.
Mayor, I briefly spoke with some of the counselors who really hadn't had a chance to really dive into this at the point in time when I talked to them. But they said one of their concerns that they would be taking a look at as they looked at the budget was the borrowing and debt factors. And I'm curious, how does city borrowing and debt factor into your proposed budget?
Yeah, it certainly is a factor. It's a significant factor when we look at debt service, annual debt service, and the percent of the debt service that's paid by the city of Plattsburgh. We're well within our means to borrow money. That's the reason why our debt service agency makes these recommendations for borrowing money. I wouldn't necessarily say we're overly extended from the borrowing, as well as looking at several years out. Even in 2025, we should shed about 25% of that total debt service, considering that a lot of our loans, a lot of the debt that we do carry is short term, is considered short term, meaning it would be resolved within 10 years. That is a large portfolio of ours. So, sure. I mean, I think it's fair to be concerned about borrowing and debt, but I also think it should be done wisely. That concern should be applied wisely and not just, hey, we're borrowing too much money without any quantifiable justification for what, quote unquote, too much means. Again, when we go out to borrow on the open market, our bonding agency says, hey, look, you should be at a certain percentage of your expenses in terms of how much you're paying towards debt service. We are well within that range.
Although, it's kind of the budget's now out of your hands as you pass it over to the council. Are you worried that the issue of borrowing and debt will become a factor as they review the budget?
I mean, there's a number of concerns that I have of people cutting services, cutting hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the budget and then expecting for the city to deliver the same quality services that, again, people have come to appreciate. That should be a factor for anybody who is looking at this or considering this budget, including members of the public, people who have been demanding that the city take care of the resources that we have, which is built into a lot of the projects and a lot of the process that we've been implementing over the last couple of years. looking at this budget and saying, okay, we're extending that work. We are taking a look at our parks. We've created projects to improve our parks. We've created projects to improve our green space. We're adding some staffing to help support that, the increased green space, right? Because we've added the Betty Little Arts Park with no additional staffing, added the Riverwalk with no additional staffing, added more parks onto the list of park improvements and the projects for park improvements with no additional staffing and no additional resources. So when we look at this budget, and we have councilors that are saying, well, we want $200,000 cut out of this budget. Okay, well, then that means that not only are those resources that many members of this council have been saying we need to take care of, that comes under jeopardy when we start talking about cutting large scale expenses and large scale cuts into a budget like this.
Not a lot of wiggle room in budgets anymore.
Not really, and I think that's one of the considerations to make is, even though our highest expense is staffing and payroll, it's still one of the most valued resources that we have. And the cost of doing business is going up, and it has gone up. And like I said before, the city of Plattsburgh and municipalities like ours, we are not immune to these environmental and the economic increases. We have to pay more, just like you and I have to pay more for the same services and for the same commodities and goods that we consume. The city of Plattsburgh is no different. So when we look at what is increasing, it's completely in line and appropriate to how we do business and the kinds of services that we deliver to our residents.
Mayor, before I forget, for a few years, the ARPA funds have been a factor in the budget. Are they still a factor at all?
Well, I mean, like when you look at the application of ARPA funds that we used, a significant amount went to parks improvement, and then a portion of it went to demolish the Crate Center. So those monies are accounted for. They are applied appropriately, in my mind, and in my justification, to improve our parks and to improve the green space that we are managing. I think that's it's a great application of that grant fund or that quote unquote free money from the federal government based on the COVID impact. So when we look at the use of that money, I think we didn't get that much, but whatever we did get, I think we've spent appropriately and we're spending wisely.
Anything else you want to make a point about the budget on?
No, I think that, overall, it's a great budget. Again, just like we did last year, after the department submitted their budget to this office, I worked hand in hand with the department heads and the appropriate staff to make sure that whatever changes that I was proposing were in line and that could be in line with their goals and objectives, and then also made sure that the council had a say as well. And you look back historically, I think I would challenge anybody to look back and say, hey, when was the last time a mayor opened the mayor's budget process to include council to contribute before the mayor's budget process or the mayor's proposed budget was released? I think you'd be hard pressed to find that to be historically to find any example of that being done historically. Most of the time, the mayor's budget was done behind closed doors and then released, and then it was just handed off to the council as that was the approach. I think my office has been trying to incorporate council concerns, council suggestions, having public work sessions with members of the council that could come, as well as taking suggestions and incorporating those suggestions into the proposed budget before it gets released to the council. The whole goal is, again, it's trying to be a collaborative approach. Whether council takes that as that approach, I can't speak for them. I think a lot of people on the council do appreciate that approach, and that'll be a continued approach that I take.
Thanks for spending so much time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
Anytime. Anything for you, Pat.
Rosenquest is planning a hearing for November 2nd before the budget moves to the Common Council. It must approve or revise the plan by January 15th. Okay, that does it for this episode of the WAMC News Podcast. Thanks to Pat Bradley for that interview and to you for listening. Until next time, I'm Ian Pickus.